start.
Okay.
So, good morning to all the members of the Swiss Banking Association. We are an international team from NEOMA Consulting Group. I am Ilse Mendes from Mexico.
I am Kristina Huseynova from Azerbaijan.
I'm Leonie Gataman from Germany.
I'm Andrea Monroy from Colombia.
And I'm Savo Jimshadaishvili from the Republic of Georgia.
And today we will present an in-depth analysis of the white money strategy and the impact on the Swiss banking sector. We will begin by stating that every long-lasting relationship is based on trust. Trust is a value that is deeply rooted on the Swiss culture and was set as the basis for the positioning of the financial sector as a reliable entity. Unfortunately, this positioning has been undermined and it's on a deeply need of being reinforced. We will begin the presentation by reviewing quickly the origin of the Swiss banking secrecy law, followed by all the implications derived from the misuse of this law. This misuse led to a breaking point, which derived in the development of this so-called white money strategy. We will provide an analysis followed in 3 dimensions. So now we will begin by going back to the genesis of the Swiss banking secrecy law creation.
So let's first address a historical event that led to the establishment of Swiss banking secrecy law. As you know, at the beginning of 20th century, European countries experienced huge economical and political instability. Due to financial crisis and hyperinflation, German government imposed restriction on investment outflow from the country, and around 1 billion of Swiss francs were frozen on German bank accounts. And as a result, it increased social concern regarding protection from bank collapses in future, because before 1935 there was only unwritten relationship of trust between banking system and its clients. The last event that pushed Swiss government to establish this law was again German law that required German citizens to declare their financial assets. And Nazis started to use this law in order to confiscate financial assets of Jewish people. And Jewish people, in order to protect themselves, moved their capital to Switzerland and opened around 7 million of bank accounts in Switzerland at that time. So finally, in 1934, in order to protect those people from German interference, the banking secrecy law was established. And basically, in fact, it was the bank's promise to keep financial affairs and deals of the customer confidential. And any violation of this law was subject to legal penalty and even imprisoning. So now let's take a look on unethical issues that started to happen soon after establishment of this law. Due to the fact that Swiss banks applied the same standards and values for all kinds of assets, regardless of their origins, this system started being misused by bankers in order to proceed with illegal activities like tax evasion and tax fraud. Swiss banks were accepting enormous sums of money without asking any documentation on where this money was generating from, and this made Switzerland a tax haven for all tax evaders from all around the world. And basically, it also attracted many corporations and multicultural companies to move their capital abroad to Switzerland in order to maximize the profit from legal and tax advantages that Swiss banking system provided them. Due to our estimation, it cost United States and some Western European countries more than 100 billions of USD every year from tax evasion activities in Switzerland. The situation for developed and emerging countries is even worse. For around 40% of Indian GDP are black money that Indian people hold in Swiss banks. And if they would be able to return those money back to India, it would be enough to pay all external debt of India. So you can now see the volume of the problem. And in 2009, one of the biggest Swiss banks, UBS, admitted that its employees were helping foreign citizens to avoid taxes by providing so-called whitening by whitening their gray and black money that comes from illegal activities like tax fraud and tax evasion. And basically they were proposing the simple scheme. Anyone who wanted to avoid taxes could transfer the taxes to Switzerland and deposit those money to a secret bank account in Switzerland, and then arrange to declare those money as being foreign law. And of course to return those money then back to their countries without paying any taxes and legally withdraw them without any problem. So this is an ethical issue that will happening. And now let's take a look to business perspective in order to highlight the significance of banking system in Switzerland. As you know, it represents 1/5 of Swiss GDP, and it creates around 146,000 of jobs every year. Moreover, it creates around the same amount of jobs in other sectors related to banking system like IT, consultancy, audit, etc. Moreover, bank secrecy law made Switzerland a wealth management center, and it made Switzerland famous about low cost of capital. And as we know, low cost of capital creates favorable conditions for startup companies and small and medium-sized enterprises in order to support the financial activities. So as you can see, the bank secrecy law contributed much to Swiss economy, and as I mentioned before, due to investment inflow that comes partially from illegal activities, Swiss banking system became the most important part of Swiss economy. So now, before we start to discuss the strategies that your government proposed in order to regulate this issue, let's take a look to legal perspective.
Well, now, dear members of the Banking Association, I will be presenting the legal perspective before the white money strategy was established. As you probably know, the legal perspective and the legal ground pretty much relied on two main aspects. First of all, already mentioned by my colleague Christina, it's the Swiss banking secrecy law. This states that all assets, private affairs, and the relationship itself have to remain secret. But it's important to mention that this law has never been absolute in the Swiss law. The legislation always provided different exceptions, for example, when the existence of a bank was threatened. Well, the second main aspect is the distinction between tax evasion and tax fraud in the Swiss legislation. While tax evasion is seen as simply forgetting to declare something, tax fraud means actually submitting forged documents. Well, in contrary to most other countries in the world, Switzerland does not consider tax evasion as a criminal offense, but rather as an affrightment. And in Switzerland applied double criminality principle states that Switzerland can only provide legal and mutual assistance to other countries for crimes which are actually classified as crimes in Switzerland. So that means that Switzerland cannot provide any assistance in terms of in case of tax evasion. Also, this means that financial intermediaries actually managing money coming from tax evasion cannot be held responsible for money laundering. Well, as we see, those legal grounds give many taxpayers from all over the world the opportunity to put their money in Swiss accounts and to protect that money from the domestic fiscal authorities. Obviously, that was seen very negatively all over the world, and in 2008, it came to a breaking point. In June 2008, it got public that the US authorities investigate on one of Swiss greatest banks, the UBS banks, for actively supporting tax evasion in more than 10,000 cases between the years 2001 and 2007. After long negotiations, a preferred prosecution agreement was signed, and UBS was forced to pass data of 4,450 clients and to pay a penalty of $780 million US. This case pretty much set a precedent at that time, because not only the bank admitted of being guilty of doing that, but also the Swiss banking secrecy law was broken, and it was found to be lawful since the existence of the bank was threatened. Well, then in 2012, the next example was set by the US government. The most famous and oldest private bank of Switzerland, Wegelin, was also charged for actively supporting tax evasion, and they actually had to close the door after paying $74 million US. Well, in contrary to those big banks like UBS, the more smaller banks, the private banks, they do not have the financial resources to survive such lawsuits, so they had to close. Well, in one of his statements in the law, in court, the former head and the co-owner of the bank, Konrad Humna, stated that actually the practices they were charged for were the most common practices throughout the entire Swiss banking sector. So that statement and the admission of guilt heavily burdened all Swiss banks. Of course, the fear of further prosecution grew among the sector. And soon there was a program established by the US authorities that helped Swiss banks to submit self-indictments. The banks were split into two categories. In the first category, there were almost like all the big banks, like the Credit Suisse, Julius Baer Bank, everything. And they will have to negotiate their penalties themselves and individually. And the second category, almost consistent of all the smaller banks, the private banks and everything, there was a common flat rate. If those banks are willing to disclose all their US business and to pay a penalty up to 50% of all the money hidden, they will have no further investigations or prosecutions. Well, until January 2004, because 2013 was quite the deadline, 106 Swiss banks have submitted self-indictments. And that's quite a big number because it represents 1/3 of all the banks in Switzerland. Well, obviously there was a huge need for change, and my colleague Andrea will talk about that and introduce that change now.
Okay. Now I will explain the white money strategy, which is kind of the outcome of all that has happened. So the bill draft was sent in February 2013 for consultation to all Swiss political and economic actors, and we are going to go through the outcome of it. The major objective of the strategy is combating abuses in the areas of money laundering and taxation. So we will start with money laundering. There are 5 main points which are kind of the core of the white money strategy regarding money laundering. The first one is the introduction of a new predicate offense. And the goal of this is to extend the criteria that characterize tax fraud and tax evasion, because as it is today, an offense that can be punishable by more than 3 years, it's actually a predicate offense to money laundering. So what they need to do is to make those offenses felonies, which are more serious crimes. At the end, what they decided is that tax fraud and tax evasion will be regarded as predicate offenses to money laundering when the taxes evaded exceed 200,000 Swiss francs. And just to be clear, by a predicate offense, I mean the activity done to gain the funds that later on need to be laundered, like prostitution or drug dealing. The second one is increase the transparency of legal entities. The measures to identify legal entities or the beneficial owners of legal entities as they are now are very ineffective. So it's important to have a new set of measures in order to identify who is getting any benefit out of any legal entity. So they will start with all listed companies, and then progressively they will identify all legal entities. The third one is identification of PEPs. PEPs stands for politically exposed person. And for the PEPs and their assets, the bank secrecy law has been crucial, and they need to remain protected. And besides the political stability of Switzerland, this is the main driver for them. This is the reason to go there and open an account. So it's important to guarantee that they will remain protected. Nevertheless, it is important to identify who they are and what is their situation. And in order to do that, the financial intermediaries are going to have a new risk-based approach. That is kind of an assessment to do, and I will explain that later on better. The fourth one is regulations on cash payments. This is about sales and purchases. All sales and purchases of both movable property after the white money strategy is implemented, they need to be done through a financial intermediary. And that financial intermediary is going to be subjected to the Anti-Money Laundering Act. And the purpose of this is that they can keep on track the funds and know what they are doing with them. And the last one regarding the money laundering is extending the powers and responsibilities of the MROS, which stands for the Money Laundering Reporting Office of Switzerland. The idea is that they have the power to obtain information from other federal authorities when they consider that necessary to analyze any suspicious activities. And actually, if they find information which is kind of which is compromising any financial intermediary, they have the duty to report that to the competent criminal authority. Now we will focus on taxation. On taxation, there are two main points. The first one is enhanced due diligence requirements, and as I mentioned it before, it's going to be a risk approach to make an assessment about the tax situation of a client. Why it is a risk-based approach? Because the Federal Council do not want to impose on every financial intermediary the duty to ask for self-declarations from all their clients. So they want to set risk indicators, and that is going to be done by the Anti-Money Laundering Act. So it's going to be predefined and ready to be applied. At the end, the financial intermediary, and according to the result of the assessment, they will decide whether or not to accept the assets deposit. And also, if they find compromising information, they have the duty to report that to the MROS, which is the Money Laundering Reporting Office of Switzerland. So these are the main points about the white money strategy. And now Else is going to explain something that we have called the ethical path of this situation.
Right, so summarizing, the banking secrecy law was established to act as a shield that became a right and an obligation. Unfortunately, as the time passed, it also became a safe harbor for felons. What we have to take into account is that we observe that most of financial institutions weren't aware of the ethical impact of these practices. As we can see here now, and also with the UBS in 2008. However, dear members of the board, we have to understand that not every end justifies the means. On the other hand, the role of setting up an ethical framework has become crucial. At the end, the goal of the financial sector in Switzerland must go far beyond generating profits on one hand and ensuring the ongoing of the sector itself. We must reshape a framework in which the activities that we develop can be done without undermining people's welfare. What we have seen is that on the media there have been several statements about your concerns, being two the main ones. The first one is that it will scare off millions of clients by forcing them to declare their tax situation of the funds they have hold in a Swiss bank account. But we have to question ourselves, where does this money comes from? At the end, not all of the funds come from suspicious activities. And if they do, every financial intermediary must be aware of the impact that funding this money have on people's safety, security, and on the overall economy, not only on Switzerland, but also on the countries where this money comes from illegal activities. The second one, it is extremely dangerous for the financial place. But then, what about reliability and the future? At the end, how I have stated before, trust has been the basis for the positioning of the sector, and it can be threatened, and the real danger relies in the potential inclusion of the sector itself on the grey list by the OECD. This can really undermine the overall integrity and trust of the sector. At the end, it lies in your hands the possibility and the responsibility to make a change. So basically, it's up to you now. We will now continue with the legal approach of this proposal.
Dear bankers, as you already heard, compliance with OECD standards requires that banks exchange information on tax matters with the intermediary of MROS. Currently, Switzerland has double tax agreement with 80 countries, but this doesn't mean that you are required to exchange information with all of them automatically. First of all, Swiss government has to renegotiate the terms of agreement with each country separately. Also, as you know, banking secrecy law and distinction between tax evasion and tax fraud will be abolished for foreign clients, but for Swiss nationalities there will be no changes. For this reason, there may be increase in the number of high net worth individuals who will be requesting the citizenship of Switzerland and then removing their assets into your accounts. Also, it will be really helpful for you if Swiss government considers changes in some of the regulations. For example, decreases the level of taxes or strengthens criminal law against those people who may disclose information about clients' assets for misusing it. Now, let's see what financial impact the changes will have. As you already know, Switzerland was the biggest offshore center in 2012 with more than 2.2 trillion USD on the accounts. It is very hard to say exactly what portion of this money was coming from illegal activities, but as it is estimated, around half of the assets under management had a special need for discretion, and around 80 to 160 billion USD may leave Switzerland in coming years. But this will not create problems for general industry. This may cause decreasing in the number of small private banks, and they may decrease by their number may decrease by 30%, but for big banks it will not create problems. We can explain this from the example of UBS. Asset wealth managers of UBS expect that around 30 to 32 billion USD will be outflown from their European accounts. But considering that in 2011 and in 2012 more than 64 billion USD were deposited in UBS accounts, and also during the last financial crisis more than 200 billion USD were withdrawn from its accounts, and bank still survived, we can predict that big banks will not have any problems because of the changes. During the process of implementing the changes will arise some limitations and questions which should be addressed, like what about the rest of the world? How the money coming from the countries without double tax agreement will be regulated? Also, how Swiss authorities will identify and secure assets of politically exposed people. The another limitation may be connected about the possible flow of asymmetric information. How you will be able to measure the reliability of documents coming from the countries which are undemocratic and corrupted. Because of the changes, not all the banks may be able to bear with the cost of assessing the assets of each of the client, and it may create problems for them in the future. Small banks may also create some of the problems. Since large public banks might refuse accepting assets from low fiscal regulated countries, small banks might switch on attracting these assets and still receive money with unclear origin because of low public interest and eye on such banks. And last, what about the global standards? What OECD strategy will be toward other tax havens? Will Switzerland be the only country imposing such requirements, or they will require from other countries also to make changes in their regulations? And dear bankers, finally, in order to retain the world leadership and compensate current asset outflow, we recommend that you concentrated on attracting people from emerging markets, because on the one hand, these countries have huge potential of economic growth and generating the wealth, but on the other hand, because of their political and fiscal instability, their citizens are looking for more secure places for protecting their assets, and Swiss banks can be one of the best alternatives for them. In order to avoid another misuse of Swiss banking sector and implement the changes without any loopholes, it will be better if OECD will be engaged in the process of implementing the changes and controls it. Our next recommendation will be about PEPs. Ordinary tax evaders must be distinguished from those people who are coming from the countries where the political pressure on the business is really high, and people really need secrecy in order to protect their legally acquired assets. And last but not the least, although we understand that you are losing your biggest advantage, banking secrecy, which was attracting millions of customers from all over the world, we think that you can still attract these people by shifting your attention to another factors. First of all, this is political and economic stability of Switzerland. Second, reliability and trust of Swiss banks. And third, high quality services and sophisticated workforce. If you correctly implement these changes, we believe that you continue attracting billions of dollars from all over the world, and at the same time you will reposition Swiss banking system as more reliable, ethical and transparent financial center of the world. Thank you very much for your attention. Now we are ready to answer your questions.
Thank you.
Shall we?
So I'm setting the timer now for 20 minutes, and we'll have an interaction in the role that you placed us in.
Okay.
Let me take the liberty of asking the first question. I'm incensed, as a member of the Swiss Banking Association, that you are recommending removing the privacy and the sovereignty of my country and my industry. And I know that you're doing it in the name of a lot of good things, but there are a lot of do-gooders around the world, and it sounds to me like you're doing violence to national sovereignty, and you're doing violence to my ability to discern the difference between someone who needs privacy and someone who doesn't, like a pet versus someone else. And so I'm feeling offended by this. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I'd like to answer that, if that's fine. Well, I think there are a lot of aspects, and the one where I could probably catch you the most with is that in the end, there will have to be changes, because the banks get sued, and the banks lose in court, and the banks lose their existence. So it's not rather a question of that's like good for the economy or whatever, it's more a question of how to implement that correctly. Because the changes will need to be done. Otherwise, the Swiss banking system will go under totally. Like as we have seen, and as we stated, the US authorities are very hard in prosecution and everything, and they just set a precedent. For example, Germany as a country, they also started, in the entire EU, they also started investigations. They have different kinds of lawsuits against each other because of the banking secrecy. Well, I think that is one aspect, and then there's the other one aspect. Because on the ethical kind of view, I understand the need for secrecy for, of course, like, for example, the PEPs and everyone. But I think the rights of Switzerland, they can only go that far that they're not hurting any other societies. And as we have seen and as we have stated in the PowerPoint and showing you, like, for example, the example of India, other societies get hurt very bad because of the entire taxation system. It's breaking down, and that's building the ground for the welfare for all the different developments, for example, in such countries like India, which is very important, because otherwise the overall welfare of the country will not have the same opportunity to grow.
So basically you're telling me this is inevitable and deal with it.
Well, I think we have to deal. I think we will all have to deal with it, definitely, yes. And I think we will have to find a way we will have to find the best way for the bankers to survive and to get a new competitive advantage. And not just because of the reason it is unethical, but also because of the reason there is like a legal perspective telling you that you're not going to survive that way, unfortunately.
Colleagues?
Can you tell me your thought process on how you came to the conclusion and recommendation to still protect PEP's information?
Can you ask the question again, please?
Can you tell me your thought process on how you came to the conclusion to still recommend protection of PEPs?
I mean, for the economy in Switzerland, the PEPs represent like major thing, and they really need to be protected because the promise to be protected is already done, and there is people who actually is gaining their money through like illegal activities, and their situation couldn't be undermined for this. Actually, what they want to set global standards. They want to, I don't know, the G20, the OECD, the European Commission, they want to set global standards. So all the financial intermediaries will work under the same condition. And if that's the case, protecting a PEP would be no easier, but at least you would know that you are protecting them.
And also it is kind of the ethical path of Switzerland. I mean, that's how it started, by like protecting the Jewish assets while the Nazi government was in Germany. And that was kind of the reason why they opened that banking secrecy law. And still, I mean, of course, the reason behind having that is protecting the people who need the protection, because not of illegal assets or anything, but just because they're coming from countries where they're not safe or where they're not. It's not a democracy. It's not.
Yeah, as we have been stated before, at the end, the establishment of the banking secrecy law was a result of many events, not only in Switzerland, but also during the globe, especially by offering protection from this international threatening backdrop. As my colleague have said, the protection for Jewish assets was really famous, so to say, or the most important example. But at the end, the nature of the banking secrecy law cannot be completely defined as good or bad. At the end, it depends on the use they will do from of it. At the end, and again, the purpose of it is good and it's completely ethical. The controversial things arrives with the misuse of that. So at the end, the white money strategy is a proposal to diminish this and reverse the negative effect that this use of the banking secrecy law has caused.
One of your last recommendation, I believe, was to attract and retain a quality workforce. Can you give us some recommendations on how we go about doing that?
Not attracting. The recommendation was that Switzerland has already very high quality workforce, and it is well known in the world with its reliability and with its sophisticated experts in the asset management. And this is one of the advantage which can replace the previous advantage, which was the banking secrecy for foreign clients. So this must be one of the compensation factor for attracting the people in the future.
Yeah, and also it was more stated that they have had always two main competitive advantages. One, of course, the banking secrecy law, but also Switzerland is one of the most stable countries because it's not affected by any activity of the EU or whatever, and it's always been very well known for the banking activities. So we say that rather than focusing what they have done previously, focusing on the competitiveness via the banking secrecy law, they should focus on their stability of the country and everything. And of course, you as the bankers, it's really hard to do, but the government is doing that. And what we recommend is that you adjust to the changes and that you really because the entire integrity and the trust in the sector is getting lost by all those scandals and everything. And as we have seen by the statements of the bankers, of your colleagues, they have to do those changes, but they're not really convinced yet. And everybody has to be in one boat on this, also your bankers, and that's the only way to keep that stability and to keep that really
at the end is that the white money strategy should not be seen as a threat, but rather as an opportunity that needs to be capitalized and to really take into account all the potential benefits that it will bring in the medium and long term for the Swiss banking system.
Why do we have to do it now? Why can't we just wait?
Now?
Yeah.
Because we've seen at the breaking point that the pressure of the EU and especially the US, for example Germany and the US, is growing and growing and growing. and now they're suing. And I mean, that's the legal part of it. I mean, we can argue the ethical part of it. It probably should have never started the misuse, and actually therefore we're too late to do something. But now we actually really have to do something, because otherwise the banks will not survive and the entire sector will be.
I would like to add that there is a need of a big shift in the mindset, and we really need to start thinking somehow different and set boundaries and understand that we really need to develop the framework in which the activities can be done with integrity, and that's in your hands.
And also maybe you don't care about the ethical issues, but because of the pressure coming from the Western countries, it has also very negative impact on your business. Because as Leonie already said, 13 banks were sued already, and UBS had to pay 380 billion. Bank Wegelin, which was the oldest Swiss bank, had to pay 74 billion, and after this, it wasn't able to continue its operations because it didn't have any money for this. There are around 100 right, still left. Around 100 banks are still under this process of
They submitted self-indictments and they are checking their penalties now. Like I said, they're in two different categories.
And if they will be sued, they will also have to pay big penalties. And if in the future you will continue acting this way, the Western governments will also continue suing the banks, and you will again have to pay the big money, which is just losing.
So if the attitude and the behavior is not going to be changed, then the trust is going to be lost. And the trust is the main competitive advantage that Switzerland now has, the trust and the stability. But if there are going to be more and more scandals and more statements of bankers saying that they really don't want to give up the banking secrecy because they're scared that their clients will have to declare their money, basically, then really the banking sector will lose all their competitive advantages.
And also it would be good if you consider also one more fact, the power of the United States and the European Union. These countries can impose these sanctions against Switzerland and against the business activities which you have abroad, like in the United States or in other European countries. Your banks may be closed and you will lose your clients there, and you will be just left with the people who are coming from emerging markets and from the countries where they don't care too much about such issues.
Still feeling grumpy.
I'm really sorry.
In the United States, since 9/11, individual liberties and freedoms have been compromised in the name of security and the good of the whole. We've had our NSA scandals, and we've had government intruding itself into our lives in ways that we're not accustomed to, and we were founded on a principle of liberty. That's why we left England. And as a Swiss banker, I'm thinking the United States experience about security is not at all that much different from what you're suggesting here. You're saying our liberties are going to have to be reduced. That is our discretion. And in the name of some greater good. And it sounds like Big Brother or the Leviathan, it makes me nervous. I don't doubt for a minute that there's crime to be prevented here, but it just feels like this Big Brother is taking away something very precious, and that we shouldn't give it up without looking at it very carefully.
Definitely, but we have to be careful here, because we're not giving up banking secrecy.
Yeah,
that is not what is going to happen, because the banking secrecy is going to be remained for all those people, like as we stated, for first of all the Swiss people, but then again for all the PEPs. And those are the people who really need the secrecy, because if you think about it, there are two kinds of people who need this banking secrecy: the ones who want to hide their money because they're scared of their fiscal authorities, and then the ones which have legal reasons and actual correct ethical reasons to hide their money. And the banking secrecy is going to remain for those ones. So we're only going to reduce the misuse to eliminate and identify the people who are not using it for ethical correct reasons.
Yeah, what is going to happen is like, we need a third factor, which is the OECD. And also, it's not like they are going to give up on the secrecy law. They're just gonna set measures in order to identify that they are protecting the people they have to protect. It's not that you cannot protect them, it's that you really need to be careful about who they are and what is their tax situation. And that's not only good for like, I don't know, the overall economy. It's good for you because it's the money you're handling. So
and as you see, you get subject to prosecutions such as for money laundering and everything, like in the latest years, which has never happened before, but everybody as a banker, I mean, you probably don't want to see yourself in a lawsuit sitting in Germany, in the US, in France, or somewhere else, and being like, all of a sudden subject to prosecution yourself, not just the bank, but it can also...
And actually, it's not like an imposition. It's that you are going to have this tool, and it's up to you whether to use it or not to make an assessment about your clients.
I have a choice.
You have the choice.
But just for the ones where you don't have double...
For the PEPs.
Yeah.
Is it PEPs for all countries?
Yeah.
Now we know, just based off of a lot of recent news, that there are some fraudulent PEPs out there. So you're saying we're going to protect those people as well?
No. The idea is that you make an assessment. So the thing is, there are going to be like risk indicators, and you are going to make an assessment, and you are going to find out how risky they are as an investment for you. So it's going to be safer for you, and it's going to minimize the number of PIPs who are not actually PIPs, but are just taking out a benefit of the bank secrecy law. So you are going to have the tool, and you are going to have a third actor that is going to be supporting the entire process, to make sure that all financial intermediaries are doing the same thing. So there is no like a threat to your competitiveness, because you don't want to be the only one asking for self-declarations to everyone, because that would kind of scare them.
But if you don't use your right correctly and you still protect the assets which have the illegal origin, when the authorities come and they check the assets of your clients and they find this information, they will still again sue you, and you will again have to pay the fines and penalties because of this. So you should be more fair in the assessment process and more deeply integrated in the finding the origins of the money, where is it coming from.
What do you do with your people who are using the banks for the money laundering or illegal activities?
Which the ones we have right now, already on our account. Well, they're having the system that they're saying actually everybody who has money on their account, you can either turn in something that says it's declared, or you take your money out of our accounts. So that's pretty simple. And then of course, like, you might have exceptions like for the PAPs, or I mean, that's going to be a very hard process, and it's going to be very costly, because also you have, I mean, from all those countries, like corrupted countries and unstable countries, you might get a lot of forged documents, so the assessment will be very costly, but that's the strategy for all the accounts we're having right now. So we want it clear. But there's still a lot of lawsuits going on about how to do that exactly. I don't know if you've heard about Germany, those text DVDs that were stolen and then bought by the German government, and they're having it's very complex, and they have different lawsuits with different countries going on.
About 2 minutes left here. Any further questions from my fellow Swiss bankers? Do you have any further comments to make to persuade us? Or do you think your presentation stands for itself? Now that you've heard that.
I would like to add something, that at the end, the tax havens in other countries, they all will build on the model of Switzerland, Swiss bank, Swiss haven. So Eliminating the Swiss banking secrecy law for illegal activities will automatically eliminate the tax haven in other countries. So think global, think global and yeah, and act global.
The philosopher Hegel said once, you either walk through life or get dragged through.
Yeah, that's pretty much
I
what
think you're telling me
yes.
that.
Yeah. In the end, it's basically that, yes.
Okay, I think unless you have any more questions, I think we can shift to the last 10 minutes where we slip out of in my case, my grumpy role. Give you feedback on your presentation. Would any of you like to start? Or?
I guess my recommendation would be just have a stronger case. I wasn't obviously clear on all of the recommendations. I think you did a great job and you had a lot of content, but just maybe a stronger case like you did when you were answering these questions, get us to have a little bit more buy-in and feel that draw that we must take action. So maybe just a little bit more clarity around that.
Yeah, I was a little lost at the beginning, even towards the middle of the presentation on what position you're taking or what I'm supposed to be feeling. So it was hard to focus a little bit on what your recommendations really were. And then at the end, after the question and answer session, I felt that I really understood a lot more about what the recommendations actually were. The risk indicators, I think, were huge, weren't really focused on, right, in the presentation itself, but it made sense afterwards. So getting a little bit more focus on that would have been good. And then I think you guys did a great job presenting. All of you had great presentation skills. You did really well and very clear. I think you focused a lot on the legal aspect of the situation and not necessarily all of the ethical considerations that you could have brought up in the presentation, which I think you touched on a lot here and there, but it wasn't really brought forth as much as the legal aspect was, I guess. But overall, good job, guys.
I tend to agree. I felt like you were stronger in the question and answer session, and you were more convincing and spoke with more conviction than in the presentation piece of it. I did like how you used statistics and facts throughout the presentation to kind of back up your position, and I liked also just kind of the look and feel of your PowerPoint selection. So you guys did a really good job.
Well, I agree with my colleagues here that a lot happened during the last 20 minutes after you finish your presentation. And part of my motive to role play here was to bring out things that I wasn't sure got brought out in terms of my self-interest as a banker. And you obviously have done a lot of work to put this together. It's clear that you've done your homework, so congratulations on that. I'm not a PowerPoint expert, but I always think less is more when it comes to displaying information on a screen. And there were a couple of your slides there that seemed to me to be a little too busy, and it was hard for me to. It's a very common problem with PowerPoint, but for future reference, I would say, I mean, you did, to your credit, I want to say that you used graphics nicely, but there was an awful lot of small font information attached to those graphics, and I could barely read it. And it might not have been necessary, or maybe a two-word phrase in a larger font would have accomplished what a whole sentence otherwise would, because at least I could read that and it would catch it, and then I could go back to listening to you. Sometimes the PowerPoint takes away from the speaker instead of enhancing the speaker. But that's a refinement that I understand why you put in the PowerPoint what you did. I mean, it was good stuff, but some of that good stuff could have been communicated without having it on the screen. Any other comments?
No, I don't have
Ken, if you wouldn't mind, could I say a couple things? Or could I meet with them if they volunteer afterwards?
Yeah, I think it'd be better,
Okay.
just because of the way we've designed this format, it should be really this panel.
Okay.
But thank you for offering, and I hope you'll take it. One of my colleagues mentioned, I think Christina, that there was a pretty strong emphasis on the legal dimension here. And that came across loudly to me when you dealt with my grumpiness by saying, hey, this is coming. Okay? And so what that did was it dampened the emphasis on the ethics and appeal to my character or to my values. It was really an appeal to my self-interest. And since you've been asked to analyze this from a business point of view and from a legal point of view and from an ethical point of view, it may be that the ethical point of view in your listener wasn't being appealed to enough, even though it was very clear that you had an ethical point of view and where it was coming from. I wasn't sure I was being addressed ethically. I was more being addressed, it's good business, and the train is coming, get off the tracks. Is that fair? Well, any further feedback from the judges? Do you have any questions of us? This is people to people now. We're not playing roles. No? Well, then maybe our friend can go ahead, since we've discharged our responsibilities.
And I'm a judge at a couple other groups this afternoon, so I see my responsibility here is to help you all prepare for tomorrow. And number one, Kenneth played a really good grumpy role. And if you had not responded, you were sunk. You wouldn't have gotten the job. Now, as to your response, to ethics and business, but ethics especially, as you started, the theme was trust. Maybe you could tie up at the end, reminding that it's trust. Because when Grumpy, he fronted you off. He's upset. When someone is upset, take them at their word. The first things you say, I apologize, and you also say, I am sorry for upsetting you. Don't give reasons. Say both things. And because some folks, you think they're grumpy when they tell you. If you don't apologize, you just open the door to hell. That's true. So tomorrow is going to be tougher than today. It's interesting. Sometimes we, in conversations, a conversation always boils down to one-on-one. So just because question A gets answered, sometimes with question B, more goes to A. Because all of your responses to the other judges went right back to Grumpy. You could have put all that in response to Grumpy, but you didn't have to, because all the other judges you got all your stuff in, which is good. And a couple things you could use with Grumpy tomorrow. First, especially in your fact situation, go back to the original purpose of the Swiss privacy laws. That is hugely ethical. That is hugely, frankly, in my opinion, an ethic that the world is thirsting for now. That kind of guts. And you could have just reminded Ken, the world's evolving. We started at the right place, and we're going to end up at the right place and leave it. And then you did, when he confronted you, the young lady in the middle, you use the word yes. Try to always start an ethical answer to an ethical question with yes or no, and then explain yourself. Don't explain yourself and the audience is wondering, does he mean or she mean yes, or does she mean no? Just because ethics, if you're going to be ethical, you got to be ethical, and it's risky, it takes guts, and it takes willing to lose and be told you're wrong, even when you're right. So my feeling is that you all, the issue about the question and answer period, you saved yourselves. You clearly were much better during that segment. And try to, one suggestion I have on your, like everyone else mentioned, there's too much on the screen. You don't need that much. Your structure was good. Don't say all that, it's too much. But otherwise, I enjoyed both, and also I enjoyed the judges. I mean, I thought that the judges, especially the lady in the middle, she just asked you very point-blank questions. And sometimes with point-blank questions, you don't know what to do with them. And you all did really well, so
Thank you.
good luck tomorrow.
Thank you very much. You got a bonus today, and we appreciate it. We want to give our judges some time to process what they've heard and a little quiet time. But thanks for your presentation and your responses. Thanks, Alyssa.